Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about Trudeau's $250 rebate costing taxpayers $322, Montreal expecting more arrests following pro-Palestine and anti-NATO protests, the Canadian government spending $100 million on a gun buyback program that is yet to collect a single gun, libraries branding books critical of gender transitions with children as transphobic, the Liberal cabinet minister who, quote unquote, resigned amid scandal but is still collecting a taxpayer-funded salary, and the philosophy of freedom. All right, first off, how Trudeau's $250 rebate will cost taxpayers far more than it's worth. The Liberal government's $250 rebate will cost Canadian taxpayers $10 billion or $322 per taxpayer, after factoring in interest on borrowed funds and bureaucratic inefficiency. This quote-unquote affordability measure burdens 31 million taxpayers with a 29% higher cost than the rebate given to 18.7 million people. Trudeau, who dismisses monetary policy and economic focus, pushes a plan that exacerbates deficits and economic strain. The policy reflects either gross incompetence or self-serving manipulation to avoid accountability while Canadians shoulder the financial pain. Far from helping affordability, this measure worsens economic suffering, highlighting a government out of touch with Canadians' well-being. So, do you think the Trudeau government is incompetent, corrupt, or malicious?
And all of the above.
I was just going to say, I'd like to say
all of the above.
None of those things are mutually exclusive.
No, it's just wild what we're watching these people do. This one's interesting though, because everyone seems to be on the attack right now. Like I was watching a clip from CBC that I sent you earlier today, and even the political pundits on that show were just ripping him apart. And it was interesting. Like they were saying a couple things. Hey, this is going to cost us more. How out of touch is this? This is ridiculous. But one of them made a good point that was kind of surprising to me, that this has to go through the House, has to be passed through the House. I didn't think about this because I'm an idiot. But the Conservatives have been holding up the House ever since the Liberals refused to submit the information for the $300 million corruption scandal through the Green Slush Fund. So the House has been effectively frozen, right? But now, in order to pass this, the Conservatives have to open up the floodgates again. So there's this argument to be had now that Trudeau, who's giving everybody $250, which is going to cost them $322 because he's an idiot, he's going to be able to go out there and say, well, Pierre Poilievre's the one stopping you from getting your money. He's the bad guy. And because he controls the media, or at least 70-80% of it, that's going to be the common narrative through the holidays, which is
that's not even a hypothetical. Let me show you a video right now. I'll plug this in where Trudeau is already doing this, and he's openly stating that he wants Parliament to unfreeze.
I am certainly hopeful that the NDP will see that a frozen Parliament doesn't deliver for Canadians. Like I said, the Conservatives have been blocking all the affordability measures that we've been putting forward, and to see the NDP tacitly agreeing with them has been a little confusing for a lot of progressives across the country. So with this measure that has to get through Parliament, and get through Parliament quickly so people can start feeling that relief at that tax break as soon as mid-December comes around, the NDP is going to have to step up and get beyond the freeze that we're seeing in Parliament.
So I hope people see this for exactly what it is. This is just a chess move. That's all it is. He's just
the translation is, let us get away with corruption,
yes,
or I'll make it look like you're against helping Canadians.
Well, yeah, exactly. And here's what he's saying to Canadians. Oh yeah, this is huge corruption. How about I use $10 billion of your dollars and just buy my way out of this once again? That's exactly what's happening. It's ridiculous. So yes, incompetent, yes. Corrupt, yes. Malicious, all of the above. This guy's ridiculous. It's good to see everybody on the attack though. And it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier. I think it was today. I don't actually have a problem as much, which is crazy. I don't have as much of a problem with the Liberal Party as I do with Justin Trudeau, which is an important designation for me to make, because I don't like a lot of Liberal policies, but I see they're still getting a lot of support. People are still supporting them, so there must be something there these people like. I think a lot of them are blind. I think a lot of them are being manipulated by the media, but there's something still there. But nobody seems to be supporting this guy anymore. Like, his time's up. His time's up. Now he's gonna continue doing whatever he's doing, dancing at Taylor Swift concerts and pretending like everything's gravy and we're the problem. I don't know. But it's good when he does stuff like this that he's getting called out on his shit immediately, even from CBC.
the entire Liberal Party, the MPs, and especially the cabinet, they're all extremely corrupt to the point where they've got to be. I mean, we'll get into it later with Randy Boissonnault.
Yeah.
But then also you look at things like Mary Ng, who has been tied to the Chinese Communist Party. She's a Trudeau cabinet insider. All of these kind of things. I think the corruption runs real deep within the Trudeau government.
I think what I meant, I totally agree with you. So I think I think I misspoke a little bit. What I meant is the Liberal Party sort of as like its own institution. Like I don't agree with a lot of it, but I still think that much of the institution could be a credible party for a lot of people. Not you and I, not the way we see the world. If you get rid of Trudeau and obviously the rest of these people that are clearly corrupt and just benefiting from this system. But it's just like the distaste for me, and what's really dragging them down is actually the individual.
Right. And so I just wanted to break down that math, how I got that figure, because it is something that I just kind of did last night. But so this $250 rebate, yes, they've said will go out to roughly 18.7 million people. So 250 times 18.7 million is 4.7 billion. Again, the important thing is that any new government spending is inherently debt driven because we've been running deficits for nearly a decade now. So there's zero free cash flow here. So this is all on quote unquote the taxpayer credit card. But then so the government is selling bonds at 3.5% interest, which is government debt. And then so if you consider, let's say it takes them 15 years, which is a generous amount of time to pay this off because the amount of debt we have is roughly like 50% of our GDP. We're not clearing that off with any time soon. So once you add the 3.5% interest on the 4.7 billion, it becomes $7.2 billion altogether. And then on top of that, this is something that Joe Carson pointed out in Diagnosis Red Tape really well, which was that 39 cents of every tax dollar that comes into the government gets wasted on bureaucratic inefficiencies. So even just think about it.
His guess
right?
was 40 cents?
Yeah, roughly 40 cents.
Our guess was 80. So yeah. just kind of comparing.
Well, once that's just
bureaucracy, not corruption.
That's not corruption.
Yeah.
That's not this
conflicts of interest. Stuff. Yeah, just straight up theft.
Exactly. So that 39 cents just goes straight into, say, salaries, tax collection, infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff. So once you consider the 39 cents they have to take in, this means that too, any government spending that they promote, if they tell you there is a price tag of, oh, we're going to spend $10 billion on this program, it inherently means that you have to add a $3.9 billion essentially administrative
add
cost
40%
to do it.
Immediately at
right
40%.
There,
yeah.
Which is crazy. So then this is the different part too, is that you only have 18.7 million people making under $150,000, but you have 31 million people that have paid taxes in 2023. So this means that, yes, 31 million people are on the hook for the payments going to the 18.7 million.
Right.
And that means 31 million people are going to be paying $322 so that 18.7 million people can get $250. That is
wow,
bananas.
And you know what? Actually, if you look at our debt run this year, they had forecasted it at 40 billion. Now, recently, they're saying it's 46 billion because they're going to overshoot it by 15%. That doesn't include this gift. So now you're going to cross the $50 billion marker once again when they said they were going to balance the budget. This party's a joke. Right now.
And one thing that's really important to note here as well is that just last week, Trudeau had another famous Trudeauism where, about how stupid he is economically. And so he's had a reporter pressuring him and asking him something about food and affordability and all this kind of stuff. And he said, oh, we'll let the bankers worry about the economy. I'm focused on delivering for Canadians.
I can't believe you said that shit again. I saw that clip. I'm like, bro, you said this once and it's been replayed 50,000 times. What are you doing? Don't say those things again.
It's insane.
That's ridiculous.
But so this does show that he is taking all economic policy is coming from people
that benefit economically from the decisions he's making directly, more from a private market than what's good for the public. Yes.
So who makes the interest on those bonds that he's selling? That 2 point. So this one measure that they're going to have to print money for is, yes, $4.7 billion. But that means that the banks are going to be the ones earning that 3.5% interest, which is the $2.5 billion. So like, okay, your economic policy, of course, that's literally like going to Visa and being like, hey, can you do my weekly budget for me? Of course, they're going to be like, well, no, you've got some money to spend.
You need
Go
one
ahead.
car for every day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. That's what the equivalent of this is.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. It's ridiculous. But look, at the end of the day, like the Trudeau government specifically, every time they do stuff like this, they just make it easier to basically vote out of power. You know what I mean? There's just no way that he's got another 10, 11 months. You know, we'll see what kind of damage he can cause in the meantime. There's been a reasonable amount of information coming out that he's going to try to kamikaze the economy as much as he can, which is doing a good job just to sort of handcuff Poilievre when he gets in there. But like, it's just kind of like it's his last mile. It's just painful though.
Did you see the latest polling by Main Street Research? It just came out yesterday.
Yeah, I did.
Has Poilievre with a 30-point lead, 47% of the national poll, with the NDP and Liberals both tied at 17%.
Yeah.
That's a super majority.
Yeah, I saw the seats. Like the Liberals were fourth in the seats. Yeah, it wasn't looking good.
Still, that point remains that you can do a lot more damage in a year, and damage in construction, creation are asymmetrical. So you can destroy a lot more than in a quick amount of time than you can build over a long period of time.
Yeah, and I kind of want to go back to the Liberal Party thing just for a quick second, because I'll say two things. First of all, anytime you have corrupt politicians in any party, people doing shit like this, gotta go. I don't care I don't care what their ideas are. If this is how they're operating, like we said, 10 years in jail, take all their shit. It's very easy. Sort it out. Now, with respect to the Liberal Party, it's been an institution for a long time, and I don't think that having one party overpowering the system for too long is a good thing. That's exactly what we've got now. I still think that there is a reasonable foundation in there. It was the party of the 90s that we would sort of more likely agree with. It was the one you voted for less than 10 years ago. So I still think there's something good there. It's just, you got to get rid of all the poison apples. You got to get rid of them, right? Because they're just ruining what could be. So I think it would be better for Canada. Like you don't want to see two parties. You don't want to see America, because then you have such a big divide. You want to see multi-party. So I hope that they can find their way out of this. Because in 10 years, who knows where the conservatives are going to be and what kind of things they're going to be pushing through. Because I say this to everybody, I'm politically agnostic. It's what's going on in the economy. And people find that, some people, it's interesting. They find that like it lacks loyalty. I go, no, look, this is the very nature of politics. Otherwise, there would only be one party in every country at all times. If you were just loyal, that's it. That's all you'd have. The very nature of politics are that you change your mind based on what's happening. We're not a member of the party. You and I aren't politicians. We're voters, we're constituents. So we change our mind based on what's going on. So for me, that's kind of how I see things. And I just wanted to clear that up so I didn't sound like a liberal cuck.
Well, and our last topic for the day later on will be the philosophy of freedom. But this is where I go, like, I'm not a liberal or conservative. My primary focus is freedom.
Yes.
But again, we'll break that down as to what I truly think freedom means. But the reason that I pay so much attention to politics is because politics is deciding how we're going to use force, which is inherently anti-freedom. It's force and coercion. Like, what are we going to put people at gunpoint? What are we going to legislate? All of this kind of stuff. So that's I want the political apparatus. I actually want politics to have the least amount of control over society as possible.
Yes.
Until you start seeing a point of diminishing returns.
Yes, I agree. It's very, very libertarian.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like, there's a lot of things in their party that I may not agree with, but the whole idea of less government, that foundation, that's where I'm at.
Well, what's crazy is, you say libertarian, but the label of liberals got co-opted by socialists back in around the 1930s and 40s when FDR was putting through his New Deal, which was essentially the creation of the welfare state in America. And there was a lot of socialists on FDR's inner circle and also like Soviet Union sympathizers.
Right.
But so you had real liberals, like the classic, like coming from the John Stuart Mill train of thought, the John Locke's, Frederick Hayek, all of the like Ayn Rand, these type of true like liberal thinkers.
Good thinkers, yeah.
they came to at this point when the socialists took over the brand name of liberal, they were like, well, we need to distinguish ourselves from, because we're not this anymore. And so that's when libertarianism actually became a thing, was essentially much like how there's a lot of left-wingers leaving the left now because they were insane. That's what essentially libertarians were to liberals back in the 1930s.
Yeah, it's interesting to that point in how you're seeing it today. I saw this thing the other day and it was like, the left is saying, oh, we need our Joe Rogan, we need our Elon Musk, we need our Tulsi Gabbard, we need our RFKs. I'm like,
they are them.
Guys, they were all Democrats.
Yeah.
You lost them because how poisonous your party is right now.
Yeah,
they were there for a lifetime. You had all
them.
these people and you pushed them out. I hope you see that.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our next story. We've got Montreal police chief expects additional arrests following the anti-NATO and pro-Palestine protest. Montreal's police chief, Fatty Dagger.
That's top of the food chain. That's a good one.
That is how you say that, right?
That's how we're going to say it. Let's go.
Fatty Dagger. All right. Montreal's police chief announced that more arrests are expected following a violent anti-NATO and pro-Palestine protest on Friday that led to vandalism and clashes with police. During the demonstration, about 800 protesters gathered, with a smaller group of 20 to 40 responsible for smashing windows, burning cars, and assaulting officers. 3 people were arrested at the scene, and police have identified those behind the violence, with further arrests likely. So how much more violent does this movement need to get before Canadians say enough?
I truly do not understand how they continue to give these people more rope. I don't get it. I don't understand it one bit. Like, there's just such what's it called? There's 2 sets of justice here. It's a 2-tiered system is what I meant to say. Like, you see, and look, I don't mean to go back to the trucker convoy, but you see how that was handled, right? Because it was in the interest of Trudeau at the time to make sure that he could use the Emergencies Act and close that up. Made him look bad on the global stage. He made himself look worse. But it was peaceful for the most part, right? And those other guys, at the Coots border, we've had that conversation. They've been thrown in jail unjustly. That's what's happening right now. So, but you look at this, it's more violence from this group, right? And they just continue to let it happen. And if you look the other day, Ezra Levant from Rebel News was arrested again. So the pro-Palestinian protesters were in a Jewish neighborhood protesting. Ezra Levant, a journalist, was arrested. I think they just arrested him for fun now. It's got to be like the 6th time he's been arrested this year. But to me, that again shows me what's going on. They're like, not only are we going to let them continue doing it, if you're trying to capture it from a journalistic perspective, you're the one that's a problem, and we're going to throw you in jail. This is really out of whack for me. I don't know that I can answer the question as much as I have to maybe pose another question. What's the agenda? Why continue to let this happen in this country?
Well, follow the money, I think, because they're on the hook for a lot of this stuff. So we just saw, and I'm going to write a story on this, but this just came out yesterday, that the CRA is alleging the Muslim Association of Canada has radical links and terrorist ties to organizations and has served as a, quote, Hamas support network.
You don't say.
So then you take into account that the Liberal Party has been funding the Muslim Association of Canada. So you have taxpayer funds going to a Muslim organization, which then gets used in dispersed to Muslim radical groups, which then organize protests like these.
Right.
So you have the Liberal Party essentially funding these in not in its entirety, not directing it, not puppet mastering it, but one way or another, they are tied to this movement.
Okay, so my question is, how much money did Canada send Israel over the last year?
So I'm looking here. They've given $10 million in humanitarian assistance to things like Gaza and the West Bank.
Yes.
And then there's $21 million of military exports to Israel. Right. However, those were purchased by Israel, not aid.
Okay, and then it says, what I'm seeing here is, since the war broke out on October 7th, there's been $165 million sent to Gaza and the West Bank. But it also says that the funds that have been sent to Israel are less transparent. So in either case, they're definitely sending capital to both sides. If not, at the very least, I should say they're providing weapons to Israel. Except now, Trudeau says if Netanyahu comes to Canada, he'll arrest him because the ICC has put out a warrant for him. even though Israel's not part of the ICC. It just seemed this whole thing is just a little out of whack for me. And I guess I'm trying to understand the agenda, what's going on, because this seems to suit them. So they're going to continue to let it happen, right? And I don't care what your cause is, peaceful protesting, I'm all for it. I really am. I'm all for it, 100%. Whatever it is you want to say, get out there and protest. I'll back you for having the option to do so. This is well past that. It's been past that for a very long time. So I don't really understand how they're not at least cracking the whip a little bit. Be like, hey guys, we're letting you get away with a lot here. We got to rein this in a little bit, but they're not doing it. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a bunch of different things at play here. So I always look at incentives. So, okay, what's the incentive for the Liberal Party? First, they get to continue on, with all this funding and stuff of diversity, inclusion, and equity, blah, blah, blah. They get to seem like the virtuous types. Also, like Sam Cooper has pointed out with BC's David Eby funding the Chinese Communist Party linked organization for diversity, equity, and inclusion. On the back end of that, oftentimes is those organizations mobilizing those diaspora communities in favor of the politicians giving them the funding. So you've got two incentives there for the Liberals. One, we look like we're the white knights of the world.
Sure.
Two, this means that these organizations will help try to get us voters in the next election. And then also three, we just saw the justice minister talking about how this is why he's the one that is championing the Bill C-63, which is the hate speech laws.
Yeah, Varani. Yeah.
Now he's saying, oh, well, we need to really make sure that this bill gets passed in order to be able to deal with this harmful anti-Semitism stuff. So, okay, the Liberal Party is funding the organizations that at least in some part have to do with these protests.
$165 million is gone there. You're funding the war and these protests.
Yep.
Yes.
And then on the other side, they're saying because of the outcomes from these protests that we're funding, we need more power and control to be able to make sure everybody gets along.
So again, they've done this, actually, they've done a really good job of this, pardon me, where they set themselves up to be in a win-win situation. Either they win more votes to support their party, or they get to implement policy, which is egregious and kills free speech. That boils down what you just said. Yeah, I mean, that tracks. That makes sense. So how much more violent does this movement need to get before Canadians say enough? I don't know. How long till they pass Bill C-63?
Well, this is that Orwell quote, right, where he said, all tyrannies rule through fraud and force, and once the fraud is exposed, they have to rely exclusively on force. And that's where we're at. The fraud has been exposed. Most of Canada, other than the deranged lunatics that are legitimately brainwashed in psychosis, essentially, know that the Liberal government is lying to them. So now they're in a place where they would have to rely on things like Bill C-63, right. Bill C-11, like just strict force. Be like, nope, you just can't say that.
Yeah.
Well, like what we're seeing in the UK already. They're sending people to jail for Facebook posts.
Yeah, UK is getting wild right now. And then they were like talking about repurposing farmland. That shit's getting crazy over there. Keir Starmer, I don't see that guy lasting another 6 months.
His approval rating is dropping through the floor.
Yeah, I like the thing that they do there, though, is like, a part of their Overton window is like, this guy's fucking up, let's get rid of him.
Yeah.
Whereas here, we're just like, you could just safeguard yourself and stay in power for 10 years.
It's apparently the coalition. That's it.
Yes.
It's because of the link between Trudeau and Singh. For sure. Absolutely. And that's the thing with minority governments, but they have power for coalition over there as well. It just seems to be like, I don't know if there's just less like inter-party loyalty or... Well, I think it's because in this... I don't think it's necessarily as much as political system difference as it is, because I mean, Canada is pretty much more or less molded right off of UK's political system, but more or less just a very unique circumstance here where I think sometimes when the coalitions happen in places like Europe, it's because it is a genuine, all right, our interests are aligned here, and this gives us some sort of like political footing, and we're overlapping here, so let's work together. And as soon as that starts to not bring fruits from that labor, essentially, then they pull apart and they go, okay, this coalition's done and we're getting rid of you or whatever. But I think something really unique is happening here in Canada where Trudeau and Singh, there's some sort of like mutually assured destruction where it's like they can't part, otherwise both of them go down.
Well, yeah, that's actually pretty simple right now. If you think about it, they're two of the most powerful men in this country right now, right? But as soon as they break apart, they become public enemy number 1 and 2, and they're fucked.
And they're both powerless.
Exactly. So there's no way. This is why people are like, oh, early election. I'm like, zero chance, guys. You've got two very powerful men that as soon as they break apart, as soon as they snap that bond, they're nothing. They're in real trouble. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
And last thing before moving on here, just when it comes to these protests, this is something I started pointing out when they first started happening. People thought I was crazy. I said, it's only a matter of time until they get outright violent. Like I called it back in the early days of our podcast. What's happening here is there's a spirit, there's this type of person that is just, they're genuine psychopaths. They're that, again, there was 800 protesters, right? But there was 20 to 40 that were violent, smashing the windows, and violent. So that fits in line with that kind of that number of roughly in that like 1 to 5% range. Yep. A small portion of the population is just psychopaths. And if they can find movements that give them moral license to become violent, because then people like me, if I say, hey, guys, you got some psychopaths sitting here and they're using this movement in order to be violent, then people go, what, you don't care about the kids in Gaza? And you're like, nope, it's more so just the fact that I don't want people going violent on the streets in Canada. That's my main concern right now. Sure, the stuff happening in Gaza is undeniably terrible.
But smashing that guy's store window is not helping.
Exactly.
That's not doing anything to help the situation whatsoever.
And this is the same thing. You see it across the BLM stuff, the gender stuff, the Palestine stuff. Any of these movements where it's just a moral hot topic where you get called evil if you point to anything other than say the narrative, it allows these people to run free. And I'll make another prediction. If we don't start changing course, I think it's about a year or two until these movements actually start taking lives.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I don't think the media is helping either, calling it anti-NATO, pro-Palestine. Guys, this is like, let's be realistic. Call this what it is. Like, you sensationalize anything that's happening on the right, anything you don't like. That's how they operate. You know, everything's terrible if it's from the conservative side because you're a liberal outlet. Okay, but like, be honest about this. Just be honest, because what you're doing is you're actually sugarcoating it. But it's not exactly like that. That guy that lost his license, it was Second Cup. The guy had a Second Cup store. I believe it was in Montreal. I think it was just in connection with all of this stuff. He did some sort of like pro-Nazi salute and some sort of pro-Nazi slogan that he said that was obviously to do with this group. Second Cup immediately shut him down and took his store. Obviously, he breached his contract for some sort of hate speech, which that's fine. Cool. See you, buddy. What's crazy to me, though, that's where this movement is right now. This movement is in a place where a guy who owns a business, I've owned small businesses in areas before. When you own a business, you always put your best foot forward because you want to make sure you get repeat business. You live in a world where everybody can leave you a review. So you want to make sure you're leading with your best foot and you're being decent to everybody and you're in the service business. So you kind of want to always make it right. That's the space you live in. And this guy's out there saluting Hitler. That's where we're at right now. This is crazy. This is like where our moral compass is completely out of whack. And I actually think, like you said, they're utilizing these kids in this movement to push through this agenda, but I don't think they understand the can of worms they're opening. Because what I've noticed with things like this is that these groups find this wall, this threshold that they're allowed to go this far, you know, whatever it may be. They're always, okay, I can go this far now. Well, now I can go this far. Okay. But as soon as this cause is done, they just find the next cause. And now this is their benchmark. This is the line that they will go to, and they get there fast. That's why I just think like Canada's in a tough spot right now with this. And I think with mass immigration and us kind of onshoring all these global wars here, I think shit could get pretty wild here over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's why the goalposts always move, is because the revolution is meant to be endless, not one.
Exactly.
All right. Moving on to our next story, we've got taxpayer bill for Trudeau's gun buyback to surpass $100 million in 2025, and still no guns have been collected. The Trudeau government's long gun ban is projected to cost taxpayers over $100 million by the end of this fiscal year, despite no firearms being confiscated since its introduction in 2020. The government allocated $36.9 million for the buyback program in 2024 alone, with significant portions for operating expenses and grants. However, that wasn't enough, as the RCMP spent an additional $13.4 million, pushing total costs to $101.9 million. The program focuses on confiscating firearms from businesses, with individual confiscation plans omitted due to complexity and cost. Canada Post has been authorized to transport and store banned firearms, though it's worth noting they are still on strike. So is this program emblematic of the Canadian government as a whole, spending untold amounts of money yet achieving zero measurable results?
Yeah. Yeah. In one word, yes. This is such a disaster. I don't understand why he gets into stuff like this. And now he's trying to make this campaign promise to try to execute on it. Just, hey man, sometimes you have ideas that don't work out. I would much more appreciate if you're like, hey dude, I kind of fucked this one up. We're going to pull back. We're not going to do it. Okay, cool. We're looking at 100 million right now. This is going to end up costing us over $1 billion. That's what this is. And like they said, they're not doing individuals anymore. They're just doing businesses. So what do you think businesses are doing? Offloading their guns as quickly as they can. For sure. I mean, you're just probably selling them and then, or basically just porting them right now to someone in a personal name or whatever, and then selling from there. Like I imagine enough of that's happening. But anyway, not a big deal. The thing is, their goal here was to get rid of assault style weapons, right? So now the government initially estimated that around 150,000 there were 150,000 affected firearms, but industry figures suggest that there's more like 500,000 already in Canada. So even if they hit their estimates, hit their targets, keep it on budget, do everything they're supposed to do, they're not even going to get 30% of the assault rifles that are already in the country, let alone the number that are going to come in illegally between now and then. Fuck are we doing?
Such a joke.
I'm cursing a lot today.
And this goes to the whole spending thing. And this is a lot of government officials' mentality. Well, as long as we're throwing money at the problem, then we're fixing it. No, you have to have a system worth putting money into first.
Yes, you need proof in the pudding. Here's what's so interesting about a business. You ever start a business, you do something where you look for proof of concept in a lot of cases too. You kind of do like either an MVP or just understanding that your idea is going to work. You don't just throw in $100 million. You test it with $100, $100,000, $1 million, depending what the project is. Is this feasible? Do we have the system in place? I would rather see you spend $500,000 on a study, a feasibility study, because no matter what, that's what it's going to cost, even if they pick up a pen. I would rather see that and you say, hey, look, this is not going to fly. Hey, I know this is what we said, or this is what you guys want. This isn't going to work. Here's what it's actually going to cost. Here's the reality. So no, we're not going to do it like this. Instead, they just go, yep, let's go. They don't think about it. They don't have any idea. Then their costs get completely inflated. And like you just said, every dollar spent costs us an extra 40%. So it's just like what's so frustrating is that none of this is how this country operates, but the country's a business and it needs to go back to operating that way. So yeah, this is exactly, it's like, it is I want to call it a microcosm, but it's pretty macro because it's going to be $1 billion and 100 million already wasted and not one gun collected. What a colossal failure. But this is a mirror to the Liberal Party, current Liberal Party, and to Trudeau.
Well, across all their programs too, right? We covered last week about how despite all of the climate change, gaslighting, moral grandstanding, and public spending that Trudeau has done, Canada is the only G7 nation which has not actually reduced its emissions at all.
Which is so insane.
It's so
the amount
insane.
of shit this guy talks, I cannot believe that. Like, how is he not answering to that? How is he at least not blaming you or I? Like, blame me for driving a car. Do something. Say something. Because it's so ridiculous that he stands on this moral high ground or soapbox of nonsense and charges everybody thousands of dollars a year extra to pay stupid taxes for it. Zero progress. Oh.
And then also, we just saw there was a study that came out from BC public schools, which found their spending has gone through the roof, yet results are either stagnating or declining. So there's no correlation between public spending and progress, as far as they say.
Which is so crazy because you mentioned something earlier about finding the point in diminishing returns. So it's like, yeah, like right now our federal budget is like $500 billion a year. It's effectively doubled under Trudeau. But nothing's gotten better. The only thing that's happened is the public service has grown by 42%. Federal public service direct has grown by 42%. That's all that's happened. We've handed out $1.5 billion in bonuses. Okay, but nothing's gotten better. So obviously we were already kind of at the point of peak efficiency, which I imagine if you took an Elon Musk approach, you could have gone from the 2015 size of government, reduced that by 50%, and it still would have been just as efficient. So you can basically say, what I'm saying right now is 3/4 of our government is complete bureaucracy, bullshit, nonsense, redundancy, waste of money.
I completely agree. And Poilievre in an interview actually had a good perspective about the mindset of these bureaucrats and administrators, and when it comes to their spending habits and how they think. As long as you're spending, that means you're fixing the problem, where he likened it to going to a very expensive restaurant where somebody goes there, doesn't enjoy themselves. The atmosphere was poor. The parking was expensive. The food, the quality of the food wasn't that great. But then when somebody asks them, how was it? They go, oh, well, it was great. Well, what are you basing that on? Well, it was really expensive. Like, it had to have been good. I paid all this so much money for it. But I don't have anything that I can really take away and say, this is why I liked it, or this is why it was so good. But it was expensive, so it must be. And that's exactly this mentality that they have, where it's just, oh, yeah, across, whether it's schooling, whether it's net zero, whether it's gun buybacks, all of this, 100% of the money just gone for zero results.
I just think like democracy's been kind of co-opted. It's just been like hijacked.
Yep.
People found a way to make it work for them. They found a way to hijack it, where now it's like, if you're trying to do something for, say, housing, and someone doesn't want you to do it, and there's intra-party politics, it's like, bang, they just slap something on you that just tied you down for 3 years. And now how ambitious are you? How much more likely are you to stick around and get this job done? Because that's how democracy now works. They found a way to work within the system and completely ruined it.
Well, I think you could actually talk, as far as systems go, capitalism. And this is actually a argument for why capitalism is so good, is because despite the fact that we've got this tumor, this massive, essentially ball and chain, which is the state apparatus, things are still moving forward despite that. So it's like capitalism as a system can still maintain itself despite having a government that takes 50%, pretty much 44% of all GDP spending is government, right? So despite that,
despite losing both of its legs, one of its ears, had its eye poked out, missing a few teeth, can't smell anymore. That's basically what our capitalism is, but it still works.
Yeah. I hate too when people say, oh, late stage capitalism, right? It's like, no, this is early stage socialism.
This is bullshit government nonsense that's fucking everything up. That's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it.
All right, moving on. We've got libraries brand books critical of child gender transitions as transphobic literature. WorldCat, the world's largest library classification system, has labeled books critical of gender ideology, such as Abigail Schreier's Irreversible Damage and Dr. Miriam Grossman's Lost in Transnation, as quote-unquote transphobic works. Canadian libraries, including Vancouver and Greater Victoria Public Libraries, adopted these classifications following OCLC guidance. Emails reveal internal and external pressure to apply these labels, with critics arguing the move promotes censorship and undermines intellectual freedom. By tagging critical works as transphobic, libraries risk discouraging readers and distorting public discourse, sparking concerns over bias in classification systems and their impact on fair engagement with controversial topics. So, who's doing more damage to kids? Those writing scientifically accurate books about the harms of gender-affirming care, or those who are administering what is accurately described as irreversible mutilation and chemical castration?
This is the problem with big government. Shit like this gets to happen, right? This is just more government organizations that are working together to push their narrative. It shouldn't even be legal in this country. This has been tested, tried, and failed. We know that it did not work in the UK and they've shut it down completely. We know that Trump is going to shut it down completely. We know that children aren't allowed to vote. They can't buy cigarettes. They can't buy alcohol. They can't do all these other things. They can't get tattoos. They can't drive cars. They can't do any of these things because they don't have the faculties to make these decisions. In fact, I remember when I was in high school and they told me I had to decide if I was going to go to university or college when I was in like grade 11. We were the first group. We were the first generation of that. I thought, this is way too early to make this decision. How could you possibly know what you want to do with your life? And they're like, yeah, go ahead and cut your dick off. What are we talking about? So they, of course they have to do that. Of course they have to. Like, to me, this is low level nonsense. Like, there's no way you can't classify these as transphobic and push that insane narrative. You have to do that. Otherwise, how can you possibly continue on with this nonsense? So it hurts me. It hurts me. I have a little kid right now. He'll never be a part of any of these institutions. He will not be going to a public school if any of this nonsense is happening. This is insane. These people are ruining this country. It's not even a question. It's almost just rhetorical. It's so clear. What's frustrating to me, though, is that if you ask people, isolated, don't put them in front of a group, isolated, 10 out of 10 people, unless they're insane. I'll go 9 out of 10 because you never know there's going to be insane people. But 10 out of 10 sane people are all going to say, obviously, the scientifically accurate books. They're all going to say, this is insane and we shouldn't be doing this to kids. They really are. This is like, objectively, this is wrong. And we all know it, but it's allowed to happen. This is what I don't understand about society. It's been hijacked by very, very dangerous ideology at scale. You can have like
psychopaths.
Yes. Well, like there's this mayor in the US. I've been following her for a little while. It's hilarious. She just went on some crazy spending sprees, like crazy. Like she's in some trouble. She's under investigation by the FBI now. She had like this big, security team going everywhere with her. She's like shutting people's business down. Like it was wild. This black chick, I just couldn't believe she was going off the walls. So you look at that and you kind of go like, isolated incident. She got power hungry, crazy, went a little off. She went a little nuts. This is wild. Like you kind of look at it and it's kind of funny. I feel bad for the city. I feel bad for the people there. Obviously, in anybody's business, she shut down. But just in general, it's kind of a joke. And you look at it and you go, wow, that's isolated in one city. And you look, the FBI is getting involved. They're going to kind of deal with it. What's happening to us right now at scale in the West is significantly worse. They're taking all of our money and lighting it on fire. And they're doing this to our children. This is what it's just the thing is they're painting a different picture in the media and they own the media so they can weaponize it against us. But this is objectively worse. I prefer the woman who's stealing all my shit and shutting my store down and has the security team because I know what I'm dealing with. These people are snake in the grass and they are ruining our society. And this is insane. Children are, in my opinion, the only true protected class. Get the hell away from them.
The analogy I'd use here is it's like finding truth in science in general is like hitting a target. There's one way, there's one path to being correct.
Yes.
There's a million different ways you can miss the target. Endless amounts of ways. Now, we should give credit to those who have gotten this topic wrong and were genuinely interested in what's the right thing to think about in terms of, say, children with gender dysphoria and such. And they missed the target. But they had good intentions and they were trying to find it.
Agreed. Tried, tested, failed. On the
same page. These people are turning directly away from the target and firing straight at children.
Yes.
Like they're not even trying to hit the target. They're actively hostile to the very thing they claim to be fighting for.
Yes.
And it was just weeks ago that the New York Times put out a story about how there was a US study done on puberty blockers within children. And the doctor didn't publish it because they found that there was no positive correlation, right? And J.K. Rowling actually said it best. She was obviously clowning on them. She said, "We must not publish a study that says we're harming children because people who say we're harming children will use the study as evidence that we're harming children, which might make it difficult for us to continue harming children." That's exactly what is happening here. And this is something really dark, this whole transgender stuff, especially with the kids. Because again, I don't think it's just them simply being wrong because they have nothing to stand on. If you go look back at the original Dutch team's protocols, which all of this gender affirming care is based on, the data and the studies that were done there is extremely faulty. Initially, they only had 70 participants, which already isn't
not even close to enough
of a study. But then by the end of them conducting the study, it was down to 40 participants. So right then and there, your red flag should go off and go, why didn't nearly half of the people in this study bail? And then there was one death among that 70 people. So that's not statistically insignificant. That's a 2%?
1.25.
So that's a 1.25% mortality rate. That's worth investigating. And then you go to what happened with who was involved in these studies, which when they first did them, it was predominantly young boys who were going to grow up to be gay and they just didn't know it yet. But now you look at the teenagers going through the quote unquote gender affirming care, and it's predominantly young women just hitting puberty for the first time. So of course they're going to feel extremely uncomfortable in their bodies. And then take into consideration the statistic, which is wild to me too, is that despite only 2% of the population being autistic, there are 35% of the kids going into these gender transition clinics.
What are we doing? So what's really hard for me is, like you said, you can give people benefit of the doubt when it comes to trying it and be like, maybe this is the best thing to do. Okay. So I'm not even particularly mad at those people. I think they're kind of dumb, but okay, cool. Got it. But since then, like you said, faulty studies, we've got really, really good studies now that say this is bad across the board. It doesn't matter how you shake this. It's not a good thing to be doing to these kids. We know that all these other countries have stopped it because of the current studies we have, the current studies. So we know that we shouldn't be doing this. So there's that side of it, which is the actual implementation of the strategy. But then there's the propaganda side. And like you said, before it was the odd kid that would want to go through this, which I don't agree with to begin with, and I don't agree with the strategy. I'm just not for it. You want to do it when you're an adult. Fine. But the thing is, they turned this into a massive social movement that they tied into the LGBTQ movement, which they kept adding letters to so that everybody could be involved in it, could be included. You know what I mean? And you're seeing this specifically. So this is an interesting thing someone said to me. Right now in America, Canada, the West, if you're a white male or female, and you're, still a teenager, let's call it, you are the problem, right? So how do you get away from that? How do you become a victim? Because victim mentality is very important these days. Well, you just join the 2SLGBTQ movement. And then, so if you do that, well, now you're a victim and now you're not the problem anymore. So now you get your social standing back. So that was what they did with the LGBT plus movement. Got it. Then they moved this evil strategy into it. And that's where they use their propaganda to throw it at people. So they're getting all these people that they're winning over in this culture war because they feel like they're the problem. And now they're giving them these tools to mutilate themselves and ruin their entire lives. This is so dark.
Well, this falls directly in line with Mao's communist cultural revolution in China, which one of the main things that he did was, he straight up created identity classes of you either had a black identity or a red identity. Black identities were claimed to be oppressor classes. So this was your bourgeoisie, your landowners, your capitalists, your business owners, whatever, right? So if you had any of those things, if you were deemed to be a privileged person, quote unquote, you had a black label associated to you. If you fought for the communist revolution and you became a red guard, then you would get a red identity. And these people were to be appreciated and uplifted within society and shown as to be the virtuous types of people. That's exactly what you're seeing right now. This is where, to your point about where they want to escape that, I'm not the bad guy, I'm oppressed too.
Yes.
That's the exact same as people in Mao's communist China essentially self-flagellating their own history, their own ancestry, their own parents in order to get a red status communist card.
And for anybody who's wondering how this red-black's bringing out today, that's how the current Chinese social credit system works. Mm-hmm. If you do something bad, you go on the blacklist. You're put your fate. This is posted publicly on billboards. It's online, but if you're good, you're on the red list, which is also posted publicly and online and on billboards. It's wild.
And so actually just November 22nd, something crazy happened as well in regards to this kind of stuff. The township of Emo, Ontario, is being fined.
They're already looking for trouble if that's the township. Come on, tell me more.
Is being fined $10,000 and the mayor $5,000 by the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal after the town didn't make an official proclamation for Pride Month in 2020.
Oh, that's so gay.
The mayor will also be forced to undergo a Human Rights 101 training course. Again, during Mao's communist revolution, thought reform, right? The thought police and that kind of stuff. That's exactly what a Human Rights 101 training course is. That's what they tried to put Jordan Peterson through for talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is totalitarianism.
Yeah, we're going down a very dark path. This is insane to me. This is insane. I feel like I say this all the time. I feel like we sit here and we just complain about how out of whack Canada has become, but there's no shortage of evidence. How are you, just because the guy or the girl is just kind of like, I'm not a part of that conversation. Well, now you're getting fined $5,000 individually, $10,000 to the city. What are you talking about? How do we live in this world right now where it's like, if you don't toe the line, then you have to go to re-education camp? What? And this is why, like, I look at politics and go, there's a reason I don't want to be a part of it. It's shit like this. Like, I don't want to say that I would get violent. I don't want to say that I would get violent, but vengeance would be top of mind. If this is how they behaved and I got fined for this, they're like, you're going to go through education training. I mean, for me personally, I'd go the Jordan Peterson route. I'd be like, you guys are fucked. You made a huge mistake. But like my feeling would be vengeance on the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, because this is insane. What, like, not for nothing. I'm not against anybody being who they are. I'm really not. I'm very much like, hey, do what you want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care what you subscribe to. I don't care what you're interested in. I really don't. I don't care about your religion, your race. Doesn't matter to me. That being said, there is a reasonable number of people that are religious in this country that don't agree with a lot of those things. They don't agree with a lot of the LGBT stuff. I'm certainly not one of them. I know I'm over-contextualizing, but the thing is, how can you tell this guy or girl, let's say that this mayor is Catholic, Christian, whatever, right? And they don't agree with this. So they're not waving a black flag and saying, you can't do any of this and that's all wrong. And you guys are, they're just not participating. So now this guy's being fined for going against his own faith. And the city's being fined for perhaps going against the faith of the large majority of people that live in that town. I'm making an assumption, but I don't know. This is insane. This has become the country's new religion. This is dangerous shit, man.
Well, think about it. This is the exact same kind of function, this human function, as, say, those videos of when it's like the first person to stop clapping dies, right? It's like show your admiration. It's not enough that you just don't simply infringe on us.
Yes.
You have to celebrate us. Because
that's very North Korea-y.
Yeah.
She's like, you better keep clapping. Like, those people are exhausted, their hands are bleeding, they're still clapping.
Well, that's what this is in a way, is, okay, if you don't celebrate us, if you don't, shower us in praise, then we're going to start hitting you with financial fines.
This is insane.
Yeah.
Like, what's every city and what's every township, in Ontario going to do next year? I mean, I would boycott it, but I mean, likely they're just going to toe the line. Hopefully they make a farce of the whole thing. Anyway.
All right, moving on. We've got political theater. Randy Beausoleau's quiet exit from Trudeau's cabinet. Liberal Employment Minister Randy Beausoleau's resignation amid scandals, lying about Indigenous heritage, fraud, and ties to organized crime, appears to be political theater and not real accountability. While Beausoleau steps down from cabinet, he remains an MP, still collecting a taxpayer-funded salary. The CBC downplayed his crimes, framing this resignation as an ethical scandal rather than criminal, raising questions about media bias. This mirrors former Speaker Anthony Rota's scandal-driven resignation, highlighting a reoccurring path of shielding officials from real consequences. Canadians are left with a government prioritizing optics over justice, exposing the systemic lack of accountability and integrity within Trudeau's Liberal Party. So, while in office, it's safe to assume Liberals won't face accountability for their criminal levels of corruption. However, do you think after they're removed from power, they'll face trial or just ride off into the sunset?
They'll ride off into the sunset. Full stop. Because here's how this is going to work. You're not going to get any of the money back. So if you're pure Poilievre, you get into government, you got to fix this country. If you create a task force to now go after, your own task force to go after all these liberals, what are you going to do? You're going to get accountability. You're going to use taxpayer money to try to tie these people up in court. A lot of things you're going to have trouble getting your hands on things, or you're not going to be able to actually expose a lot of the information. Expose is the wrong word. You won't be able to reveal a lot of the information because it'll probably be, under national security, and then at the end of the day, you're not going to get this money back. You're not going to get any of this money back. So you're going to use taxpayer dollars to do all this stuff. And what's the accountability look like? Like, obviously, when these people are in office, unless you cross a very particular threshold, there's no actual legal ramifications. So this is not going to go anywhere beyond us just thinking they're all corrupt. In my opinion, it's just going to be right off into the sunset, and that's kind of the end of it, which is really unfortunate. Until you change that fundamentally, maybe this would be the thing to see him change. Until you fundamentally change the rules around corruption within government, it will always be corrupt. And the thing is, if these guys can hide behind the shield of I'm a politician, so you can't, I adhere to a different set of rules, because it's basically what this is, right? So as long as that's in place, and here's the problem, it always serves the people in power. So it's such a hard thing. It's like using your third wish to wish the genie free. You know what I mean? Because the third wish always suits the person who's got the power to wish it. What else do you want? You know? So that's why the genie is always in the bottle, right? So it's the same thing here. You got to find a very, benevolent, altruistic, I don't even know. You got to find a leader that is willing to leave himself and his party exposed to be able to implement something like this. I think Pierre might be that guy. I'm not really too sure, but I think that's the best you're going to see, is that they change the rules so that moving forward, corruption is not brushed under the rug, right off into the sunset. It's like you and I say, a minimum 10 years in prison. If it's something egregious, 25. Take all their assets, leave them in the bush somewhere. So, like, I don't know. I think that's the best you're going to get. What do you think?
Well, I'm torn on this because one part of me thinks that you don't have a serious country if psychopathic, habitual, incompetent liars end up running the show in just bleeding taxpayers dry for their own benefit. You can't have that and then just have them walk away afterwards. Like, you're not a real country if the people in charge of creating laws aren't being subjected to the laws.
So, I agree. It seems to be the way of the West.
So on that side, I very much want accountability here and think that there's more than enough evidence to bring that against them after they leave office. Obviously, while they're in control, nothing will be done. But then on the other side, and this is something, again, when they say that Trump is likely to become the next dictator and all of this kind of stuff, he continuously proves them wrong when he did that whole thing about just being like, my goal is to set this country on the right path forward from here on out. I am not going to be going after my political opponents.
No.
And you see this, like, it's very, okay, let's say he does get back into office, again, maybe with the whole America trying to give Ukraine nukes and France and Britain trying to put soldiers in Ukraine now. Maybe that won't be the case. They're trying to blow up the world before he gets into office. But if he does, then and shows them that he doesn't kind of go for retribution, then that does actually set the country on a right path forward of being of unity, of real unity.
I agree, but only if systems are put in place to stop the next party from doing the same thing.
And see, so that's where I'm very torn, because, okay, if whoever comes in after, say, the Liberals or the Democrats or whoever, and they come in and they start just turning around and waging lawfare, then it's like a fight. If it takes somebody to stop throwing punches.
It's the old eye for an eye leaves everybody blind.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It's like, here's the thing. If I'm being honest, I actually agree with letting it go. I know that sounds crazy, because at the end of the day, all it's going to do is cost taxpayers more money, and you're not going to get any real retribution. It's not going to happen. It's just not. There's just no chance. So when you think about it that way, because of the current laws that are in place, you're not going to get retribution. The right thing for me to do is, like you said, unify the country, push them off, implement new systems so that hold you accountable and hold the next party accountable. And I don't know what we can do here to sort of codify things so that they can't be changed, because I'm sure everything can be changed in some way or another. But whatever you can do to make it the most secure policy possible, do that so that the next party can't come in and make these changes.
Well, I think, you know what, this is where you need the whole tit for tat evolutionary game theory idea here, where the concept with tit for tat isn't an eye for an eye. There's a very important distinction to make that, okay, if you infringe on me, then I return the exact same behavior. However, I immediately reset and allow you to come back to the table so we can start collaborating again. So that's essentially the idea of the justice system, in a sense, where, okay, you committed a crime, you now pay a penalty for that crime, and then after you've served your sentence, then you're allowed to come back and start operating with us again. And then we have rules again, 3 strike rules. Okay, you do this 3 times now, it's game over.
Yeah.
we do need something like that in place, though. So I do think there needs to be the people that did ruin our country do need to pay a cost, but I think there is also a point where the punishment would end up having diminishing returns on the country as far as just setting us on a whole new hell path of
oh my god, it would be so divisive. If the conservatives went after any of the liberals right now, you'd see a divide like you see in the US. You'd basically see a two-party system. That's where you'd land.
Unless it's undeniable. Like unless they can come out with reports of like for instance, this one just came out. This is so fucking crazy, man. The lab leak from Winnipeg with the two scientists that were working for the Chinese military. Well, it was just found that when Public Health of Canada was approving the transfer of deadly pathogens to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they were doing gain of function and COVID most likely escaped from, that there was email chains showing that the people in charge of this had no fucking idea what was going on. They didn't know how to properly send these materials. They didn't know, like, essentially the supply chain that should occur. Like, so they were just sending them on commercial planes with the rest of the.
That's insane.
And then also, nowhere along the whole event did anybody in the Public Health of Canada go, "Hey, should we be sending dangerous viruses to China?" It was just China was like, "Hey, can we have these?" And we were like, "Yeah,
there you go." Yeah,
these are viruses with a 30% kill rate that don't have any treatment available for them. What are we doing? So you have that. You have those kind of instances. I do think if that narrative, like the true narrative, the understanding of what actually happened here comes into play, then I do think it would be politically palatable to bring down the hammer on some of these people.
Here's the problem. Who to blame? No one's accountable. You see decisions that happen through the Liberal Party and money gets approved. They're like, "Oh, I don't even know who stamped it. I don't know who signed it. Oh, no, it just happened. The Liberal Party just said it was cool." So it's just going to be passing the buck and passing and passing and passing and passing. And there's
anyone who touched that bucket.
Yeah, but that's now the problem. I like it. I can see the aggression in you. But the society won't do it.
McCarthy was right.
Yeah. It'll be that same thing. It's like, they'll make themselves into, like, someone will be the martyr, and then all of a sudden it'll be this just divide again. Because you can't, this is what they do in politics. It's kind of like the head of the cartel or the head of the mafia never has guns or drugs on him. He never does the dirty work.
Yeah.
That's what this is. He's never going to do the dirty work. That's exactly
how I saw the Randy Boissonneau thing, where it was just like, oh, well, it was just, I wasn't actually part of that company at the time. It's like, yeah, I just recently watched that American Gangster movie with Denzel Washington. That's exactly how he does it.
Yes.
He's like, I put everything in my brother's names and nothing is tied to me.
Exactly. So that's what you're seeing in politics. So the guys that you'd actually want to see suffer for what they've done here, it would end up being some random doctor you've never even heard of. You'd be like, what the fuck are we doing? Why are we doing this to this person?
We only have one real option, Jonathan. It's you and I versus the entire Liberal cabinet, fight to the death
Scorched
for Canada.
Earth. Let's
for
go.
Canada.
Yes.
Put us in a ring. Us versus 37 of them.
Okay.
I think we could do all right.
It depends. Is it all at once or is it one at a time, like 2-on-2 kind of thing? And then once one goes down, they can add another one. Do we get breaks? Can I have like a break for some food and some drinks?
Well, remember, the Liberal cabinet proudly boasts that it's 50% female.
Yeah, I think a lot of it will be easy. Like, I'm not. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, you got to fight 37. Like, if it was 37 fifth graders, sure, send them all in. Back myself into a corner and snuff them all. But like, if it's adults, like, you're just gonna get kind of tired. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I don't know.
Do we get weapons? Is it bare knuckle? What's
I actually
happening?
think the kids might have more energy because you look at like who's that transportation minister, the Omar dude, the guy that looks like a troll doll.
Yes, he does. Yes.
It's like that dude is, before he even gets his fists to his chin, he's gonna be bagged and just.
That's true. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, they'll evolve, though. They'll start thinking differently. After we work out like 22, 23, they'll have a different strategy. I'm just saying, it's already not a fair fight. I like our chances. I'm good with it. Just can we make them like 2-minute rounds? Because I can go ham. Like, that's all I'm saying. Then yes, I'm on board 100%. Okay, so that's the deal.
We'll be starting a GoFundMe
for 2-minute rounds.
For trial by combat.
Let's go. All right,
moving on to our last story of the day.
Just so perfect what the last story is with that.
Yeah.
What does freedom mean to you, Jonathan? Well, Liam, let me tell you. You know that liberal cabinet you were talking about?
All right, we've got our last story for the day, the philosophy of freedom. So I just kind of boiled down a Seneca thought here, who was one of the foundational Stoic philosophers. And so he said along the lines, again, I changed it so that it'd be kind of easier to understand, but he said, I am trying to live a free life. And what is freedom, you ask? It means not being a slave to any circumstance, to any constraint, to any chance. It means creating fortune on my own terms. A man who wishes to be free must live simply and avoid luxury. The spirit is weakened by surroundings that are too pleasant. Animals whose hooves are hardened on rough ground can travel any road. But when they are fattened on soft, marshy meadows, they cannot fulfill their potential and purpose. The bravest soldiers come from rough, rugged lands, while city boys and pampered types are sluggish and unprepared for a real life. A farmer who trades his plow for a sword can handle hard work, but a sleek and well-dressed man gets distressed by a cloud of dust. So, what does it mean for you to be free?
Well, I think I see this in a few ways. I think I see this when from a personal freedom perspective, and for me, that's just basically having autonomy over the decisions that I make, being able to do what I want as long as I don't harm other people. I think you see this from a political perspective, and you think about political freedom. To me, that's the right to free speech. I do think that a legitimate democracy is important. So I see that as sort of a very significant component, because a lot of other things kind of unfortunately these days branch off of that. You live under an authoritarian regime, and a lot of these other components of freedom are kind of thrown out the window. With that, I would say you consider economic freedom. And for me, that's been taken away. Shouldn't say it's been taken away. It was taken away through COVID, primarily because of authoritarian measures put in by our government, which kind of dials back to the last one, where they shut my businesses down for over 500 days. Like the empire that I built, well, albeit small at the time compared to where I want to go and compared to where people can go. It was in the hospitality business, but I worked hard and I did good. They took it all away. So for me, there's no freedom there. And that's why I tell people sometimes, like, I often say I've got one foot out the country. It's because I feel like Canada is a wife that cheated on me. It's like, it doesn't matter if you say things are going to be the same again. You suck that guy's dick. Like, it's game over. And that's how I feel about the economic freedom in this country, because you showed me what you'll do. You showed me that one time. You slept with that other dude once. That's game over for me. And the country showed us, like, hey, this is what we can do to you if we want. And they're trying to implement measures that make it even more harsh, the Pandemic Preparedness Act. So you think about stuff like that and you're like, is Canada where I want to be anymore? I still have hope with Pierre Poilievre coming in, but you look at these policies and it gets a little bit fool me once, And then I think there's your sort of psychological freedom, but I think that's more about my own personal journey of being able to control my thoughts and my emotions, and being able to use my mind in a way that is a productive tool for humans. It's funny, we spend life right now running away from our mind, and everybody's anxious and everyone's depressed. Like it's a problem, but it's not. It's your greatest gift. And I think that I need to find my way through. And I'm pretty reasonable. Like, I don't have any real issues, and I think that I've become pretty sharp over the years, which I think a lot of people want. That's what you vie for, is what I should say. I think that's kind of the goal, but I still have a long way to go. And so for me personally, I'd still like to make some improvements on the mental, emotional, and just sort of, how my mind works, because there are things in life that I don't have, but I believe that you bring things into your life. I believe that your mental state is a mirror for how your life operates. So for me, I think that that's a big hurdle I would like to overcome. And maybe this is a little off topic, I apologize, but now that I'm kind of going down this road.
And then my dad was.
No, so it's like I look at, the success you want to have, the relationships you want to have, the health you want to have, and all these other things. And I think, like everything, it happens in your mind first, and then you sort of create it. And I know that I could be doing a better job in that space. I know I just could be stronger emotionally, mentally, psychologically in many ways. So for me, it's definitely an internal one. No one else can do this. This is you battling with your own internal state of being and dealing with your own mental burdens. But it's something like I would just like to overcome or continue to refine, if that makes sense.
man, I am so grateful for philosophy and stumbling across these books to be able to kind of like, the way I look at it is it's like getting a higher resolution screen. It's like watching you're living life through one of those old 90s big TV boxes, and then all of a sudden you get this LED top of the line 4K plasma once you can kind of break these concepts down in a little bit more depth.
Right.
And so it's extremely helpful. But so the way that I view freedom, and I think this is where because I know we get lumped into the freedom crowd per se, freedom fighters or whatever, where it's okay. Freedom is as long as the government doesn't tell me what to do, which I agree, but that's only an aspect of freedom. A good example is I made a post the other day about how Canadians think that they're free as long as they can sit down, eat Doritos, and watch the Maple Leafs game. It's like, well, that is actually a form of slavery in a sense as well, because you're becoming a slave to your desires and your immediate, hedonistic desires. And then you just hop onto that hedonistic treadmill. And it's like, okay, nobody is controlling you per se, but you're also not in control of yourself.
Yes.
And so you don't have freedom in that position if you can't, if you're vastly overweight or if you've got a substance abuse problem, like that, you are a slave to that substance or whatever. So the way that I think about freedom is that every single individual on the planet has a potential that they can reach. Freedom is anything that allows you in order to reach that potential, in essentially being held back from freedom would be you not being able to achieve that. So whether that be policy or whether it just be poor self-control. If we want to fight for freedom in our societies, which I think we definitely should, I think it's one of the highest virtues, we need to have a full picture of it. Because right now it is kind of a very infantile view of freedom that gets slapped around.
That's a really good point. I agree with that. I think there was a bit of crossover in terms of how we were both sort of like, mainly when I kind of leaned into the psychological side, I think you did a good job of expanding on that, and then into me, why I was saying that is, when you're talking about the individual desires and giving into this and, the 7 sins and whatever, just as an easy way to wrap that up. That is because in that your internal state of being is you're weak. You don't have personal freedom really in that sense, like from your own mind, because you're giving into all these other things. Right. So I totally see that. I think that's actually a really good perspective to have especially for the people that kind of live in this freedom space. I just think that it takes a certain level of intelligence to be able to operate within that space. Like I think it takes a higher intelligence to be able to really look introspectively, have the self-control, and understand that is a critical component of freedom. So I think you're going to get it's going to be like a pyramid. Think about it like a population pyramid too, in a sense. The more that you try to create freedom on the scale that you're talking about, where you have control. And I think you and I do a really good job of this. I think we're close to the top where we vie to be there. I think everybody should vie to be there. Like you said, become the best version of yourself. I think there's a lot of people that are after the Doritos and hockey freedom. That's the first step. And then there's all these different steps on, finally getting to the top and being the most free, whatever that may look like. But as you rise up, I'm of the mind that you hit a certain point where you have to have the faculties and the tools to be able to climb to the next level. So I think everybody can probably, if it's, 10 steps, I imagine most people can get to level 5 or 6, but I think it takes a certain group of individuals or a certain person to be able to go 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I think that it is important to instill these things within the movements, but I think you also have to consider what is the general capacity of the movement and can it actually get there? Because on an individual level, I agree, but as a group, I think it would be very challenging to achieve.
Yeah, and actually, so I don't think everybody needs to be able to comprehend it that deep for change to be able to happen. But what should happen is that the people that are able to comprehend it become essentially symbols of that virtue.
Right.
And then that wears off on everyone around them, because behavior is definitely contagious. Like if you are in a room with a bunch of lazy people that eat like shit and all of this, the chances of you eating like shit and not getting the things done that you're supposed to get done skyrocket.
Oh yeah. Like
if
yeah.
And then, and this is exactly something that I've definitely felt ever since, you and I came up here together, where in Toronto, the circle, and they were all great people. I have nothing wrong, anything against any of these people, but they weren't necessarily ambitious. And so for me to feel like I was outperforming or like kind of doing good, essentially with myself, it was a very low bar when I was looking around.
Right.
But then whenever I get into more scenarios where, and this is why, it's been great being around you guys more often, or even just, refining my social circle more and more, is being like, okay, I only want to align myself with people that actually have a higher bar themselves, which will push me up higher as well. So all of this to say is that I think those of us that do and are capable of understanding this message kind of need to embody that in order to create real ground level change. Because something that I'm realizing, and this is kind of why I brought this topic up at the end here, is that, and actually you touched on it earlier about just kind of how we sit around and be like, this is so insane what's happening, is you also have to give people a path.
Yes.
So like, I think you and I do a very good job of being like, this shit is fucked and we should stay away from this and we should stop doing this kind of stuff. But I think even this is something that I think you and I, even just personally, could probably start working on more, is being like, okay, and here's the path forward.
Yes.
It's not just this is wrong, but here's what the right way forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wish that, yes, I think that providing solutions is super, super important. Two things I'll say. I think sometimes it's challenging with the issues that we're looking at, because it's almost like you feel like you're kind of just sort of getting the short end of the stick with nowhere to go. That's what is happening right now in Canada with a lot of these liberal policies. But to your point with what you said there, I couldn't agree more. And what I would say, to adjust my analogy, is that if everyone could get to level 5, if those people that can get to level 7, 8, 9, and 10, lead by example, I believe that we can get everybody up to level 7. And I think that there's going to be a threshold for capacity, but I think if you do the right things, you can greatly increase the value of freedom within these institutions or these organizations or these groups by leading that way. So, yeah,
right. And that's a great point, is because I think all these institutions are actually just reflections of the population that makes them up. So, change the people,
be the change you want to see.
All right. Don't forget to head over to our Substack, where you can sign up and help support this podcast, as well as receive original articles and a daily newsletter, which goes out 5 days a week. We are super grateful for any of those willing to support. All right. Catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.